Introduction. I am uncertain. Merely a warrior who has emerged from the Kelin Abyss, unfamiliar with the surroundings, stated Bru. Li Yi inquired with disappointment. Kelin Abyss? What manner of place is that? Bru gazed ahead, his face etched with reverence, pointing towards a depression in the distant forest. Kelin Abyss is the largest chasm in the demon realm. Known as Abyss due to its desolate vitality, Kelin is an ancient name passed down through the ages. Beside him, Gelina added, the Kelin Abyss spans the entirety of the demon realm. No one knows its precise dimensions. The reason we find ourselves within is that our ancestors' domain lies there, and it is said that Kelin is the foremost among the mightiest of demons. Our forebears were subjugated by it, and it remains a force of oppression. Chapter 1. The Rebirth of the Golden Sun. In a room shrouded in a deathly darkness, a solitary torch flickered, illuminating the surroundings. A group of beings clad in black robes, their faces obscured like a veil of shadow, encircled a lone figure. 2 or 3 restrained his limbs and body, rendering him powerless upon the ground, while one amongst them brandished a black dagger. To you, I offer the destined death. The voice of the robed figure, akin to the Grim Reaper, resonated deeply as he raised the dagger high and plunged it down with force. With a sickening sound, crimson blood splattered, marking the towering silhouette with a permanent black stain, symbolizing death. He had struggled, resisted, and defied, yet could not escape this predetermined fate. Thus, a chaotic and bloody era spiraled towards inevitable turmoil. Deep within the dense forest, in a long lake, a dazzling spectrum of colors flashed momentarily, followed by a figure, unclad, floating upon the lake's surface like a feather. As if awakening from slumber, the being gradually rose, standing nearly 2 meters tall, a physique both harmonious and commanding, with cascading golden hair flowing down to his waist. He slowly lifted his gaze towards the sun concealed behind the clouds, his voice weary and forlorn. In the end, have I truly failed? He is none other than the son of the eternal goddess Marika, the first Elden king Godfrey's progeny, friend to the ancient dragon Fortisax, the firstborn of the Golden Dynasty, commander of the Royal Knights, conqueror of giants Golden Godwin. Throughout the vast expanse of time, he had long forgotten his original name. Transported into the world of Elden Ring, he became Golden Godwin, the harbinger of chaos who initiated the era of death at the cost of his own soul. Having foreseen the outcome, Godwin had continuously battled against fate. In his youth, under Godfrey's tutelage, he swiftly surpassed his father, emerging as the preeminent warrior, embarking on his own journey. However, prior to this, he engaged in a confrontation with the Black Blade Malekith, achieving his objective by seizing a fragment of the destined death, known as the Death Rune. In the ancient Dragon War, he vanquished the Dragon Grail, and after negotiations faltered, he severed the 2 heads of the Dragon King Placidusax during battle, banishing it to the City of the Sky. After vanquishing the Flame Malevolence during the War of Giants, Godwin sealed its divine power within his great sword and placed it within the Flame Giant tribe, thereby earning their devotion to the fire and securing their loyalty to safeguard the great cauldron of flames. Thus, Godwin, embodying a blend of compassion and strength, gentleness and cunning, left an indelible impression upon the hearts of all in the lands between. His remarkable charisma, potent enough to inspire ancient dragons, led the world to regard him as the quintessential candidate for the next Elden Lord. Yet, Godwin was acutely aware that the red-haired hero, Radagon, remained a looming threat, for he had no desire to ascend, as Elden Lord his ambitions extended far beyond that. Every action he undertook was for the sake of Godfrey, who had bestowed his gentleness upon his own father. Even so, this devotion could not salvage Godfrey's heroic spirit, nor could it prevent his subsequent deprivation of blessings, resulting in his tragic fate as a tarnished being after the Long March War. Godwin's feelings towards his mother, Marika, were complex. The eternal goddess was but a Pharsaic god stripped of freedom. Subsequently, Radagon abandoned the Full Moon Queen and returned to Leyndell, assuming the mantle of the second Elden Lord. This time, Godwin resolved to take action, refusing to endure indignities as he had in the original tale. He recognized that Radagon was Marika and would not allow the narrative to unfold as it had. Thus, he led his Golden Sun Knights into a struggle for the throne, seizing half of the lands between and establishing the Golden Sun Dynasty, proclaiming himself the Sun King. He united all possible factions, including the formidable and gentle General Radahn and the ancient dragons, forging an alliance of knights, giants, warriors, the Samir people, and widow artisans, all aimed at toppling Radagon. In pursuit of his goal, Godwin sought to eliminate all who stood in the way of his grasp on the Golden Law, including Marika. Should he fail, he would obliterate the Elden Ring. He had grown weary of being manipulated and wished to spare the people from the devastation of demigod conflicts, yearning for a definitive resolution that would usher in an era of order and freedom. Yet, fate proved to be a cruel mistress. Godwin underestimated Radagon's might at the height of his power. He was not the fragmented being portrayed in the games. Despite Godwin employing every strategy at his disposal, the battle raged for 3 days, transforming their battleground into scorched earth. The overwhelming force rendered the area a forbidden zone, and ultimately, after severing Radagon's right arm, Godwin was grievously wounded and forced to retreat. Similarly, Radon, too, fell victim to fate, succumbing to the crimson rot inflicted by Malenia's blade, gradually losing his sanity as he returned to the Weeping Dunes to seal the stars. In the end, much like the narrative itself, or perhaps Destinia band of shadowy assassins wielding black knives, it discovered the severely injured Godwin, heralding the arrival of the Knight of Black Knives. Godwin became a soulless demigod, yet with one notable distinction. He emerged as the instigator of the shattering. Snowflakes drifted gently to the ground. Godwin had long been devoid of the sensation of cold. Removing the black gemstone from around his neck, Gedwin's gaze flickered. This was the trophy from his battle against the nameless god on the other side of the fog, previously regarded merely as a storage tool. Little did he anticipate that it would ultimately save his life, liberating his soul from the realm of Elden Ring and restoring him to a corporeal form. Gedwin had never felt so vulnerable, particularly in an unfamiliar world. Fortunately, the essence of the rune had been etched into his soul, yet it appeared to remain in a dormant state. Even his signature golden dragon lightning could only spark a flicker. Upon closer reflection, Gedwin surmised that perhaps the scarcity of divine power in this world was the cause, or that such powers were merely slumbering. For the time being, it would be prudent to proceed with caution. "Ah, old friend, you have arrived as well." Observing the dragon-shaped markings upon his shoulder, Gedwin's furrowed brow finally relaxed. This was his dear companion, the ancient dragon Fulsanx, who had lost its corporeal form during the battle against Radagon. Yet, at this moment, the dragon's soul remained unresponsive, still in a state of repose. Regaining his focus, Gedwin took strides upon the water's surface, making his way towards the dense thicket. Only the lake's surface rippled with concentric waves before descending once more into silence. After enduring 2 months of snow-laden winters, the pristine landscape appeared breathtaking to the southerners. However, to the northerners, it was merely commonplace. The relentless snowfall had rendered food procurement increasingly challenging, yet they had grown accustomed to it. Outside the wolf forest, a group of hunters trudged through the thick blanket of snow, having organized themselves from nearby villages. They ventured forth to inspect traps and perhaps strike luck, hoping to hunt a large beast. If they could capture a hibernating wilderness bear, presenting its pelt to the northern lord or selling it to a merchant caravan, the villages could enjoy a prosperous winter. Upon arriving in the woods, the daylight waned, signaling it was time to kindle a fire and establish camp, a task they performed with ease. Seated by the fire, some nibbled on bread as hard as stone, while others consumed beans, the meal conspicuously lacking in meat. "Damn it, if we had come earlier, we might have caught a few rabbits for a proper feast," grumbled a burly hunter, displaying signs of agitation as he hurled a handful of snow at a slender young man. "It's all your fault for lagging behind." The frail young man, struck by the snow, could only muster a nervous smile, knowing he was the new recruit and had indeed slowed the group down. Sullenly, he rose to the side to relieve himself. The other hunters remained silent, save for one elder, weathered by decades of harsh storms, resembling a statue, who spoke up. "I still recall when you first entered the mountains, suspended by your own trap, hanging from a tree for an entire morning. Thus, we must be a bit more forgiving towards newcomers." Upside Down Kai. Upside Down Kai was indeed the burly hunter who, in the face of Riel, the leader of the hunters, could only stifle his discontent, sipping hot water and nodding in acknowledgement. Lyre forcefully tore off a piece of black bread, soaking it in hot water until it softened, before placing it in his mouth. With his teeth no longer reliable, he could only use his tongue to break it apart and swallow it. The warmth of the food brought him immense comfort. He was intimately familiar with this forest, perhaps even more so than his own home. Here, he truly felt secure. To him, beasts were far more genuine than humans. As the group sat around the campfire, engaged in laughter or solitary silence, a scream of terror pierced the night. The frail newcomer, unable to resist the urge after drinking too much hot water, left the group. Even the simple act of relieving oneself was torturous in this frigid weather. At that moment, a fleeting glance sent chills down his spine, and cold sweat trickled down his back. Pairs of eerie green eyes flickered in the darkness, and the sound of heavy footfalls, reminiscent of treading upon snow, echoed ominously. Thus, the newcomer's fear transformed into instinct, compelling him to flee and scream. Simultaneously, Li Yi, upon hearing the cry, sensed something amidst the forest seemed to have changed. "Everyone, arm yourselves, light your torches, and climb the trees for safety," Li Yi rasped as he issued the command. Once everyone had ascended to the trees, the light from the torches and the campfire illuminated a scene that even Li Yi, despite his vast experience, could not help but inhale the frigid air of the north in disbelief. Before them, cougars, leopards, forest wolves, and grizzly bears, all manner of ferocious beasts, were fleeing the forest like a storm. Even the notoriously savage wolf packs, upon detecting the presence of the hunters, did not pause in their flight. The creatures seemed to have reached a mutual understanding to escape without engaging in conflict. When the beasts finally departed, the group waited in the trees until the last torch was on the verge of extinguishing before daring to descend. "By the old gods, when the name of the seven was that," boomed Kale, the burly man, equally shaken in the face of such a multitude of beasts. They seemed but mere morsels to the predators. Fear flickered in Li Yi's dark eyes after decades of hunting. This was the closest he had ever been to death. He promptly resolved to abandon the hunt. Not only had the beasts fled, rendering any further pursuit unnecessary, but whatever had frightened even the grizzly bears into abandoning their winter slumber was surely beyond their capacity to confront. Preserving one's life was paramount. Regardless of the snow falling in the dark of night, the group fashioned enough torches, packed their belongings, and hastily exited the forest. Chapter 2. Honor and Responsibility. In accordance with the ages of characters as depicted in the television series, set 6 years prior to the king's descent, in Winterfell, within the council hall, Eddard Stark, bearing a countenance of deep concern, was beleaguered by the multitude of domestic affairs before him. Despite having held the title of Duke of Winterfell and Warden of the North for a decade, he remained vexed by these trivial matters. Since the Mad King had ordered the execution of Eddard's father by fire and had strangled his elder brother, he had been thrust into leadership without the benefit of formal training. Fortunately, he governed the North, where the distinction between being a warrior and a lord was rather negligible. Perhaps due to this, Eddard Stark has been emulating the actions of his father and brother as remembered, gradually becoming a competent lord with the assistance of Maester Luwin, Ser Roderick, and his wife, Catelyn, at least no longer lacking a proper approach to ordinary matters as he did in the early days. Beside Eddard Stark sat Lady Stark, who was expecting their 5th child, while Maester Luwin and Ser Roderick stood on either side of the hall, and a dozen armor guard were stationed inside and outside the premises. Among those standing below was the old hunter Ryle and his companion, Kay, who had escaped from the dense woods that fateful night. Ryle of the Tooth Village and Kay of the Jaw Village, what matters do you wish to present to Lord Stark and Lady Stark? Maester Luwin inquired, adhering to the formalities necessary to uphold the dignity of House Stark, already aware of the nature of their visit. Bowing respectfully, Ryle reiterated his earlier statement. "My lord, my lady, we commend the benevolence of House Stark for granting us the right to hunt in the Wolfwood." "Indeed, I recall," Eddard Stark interjected, the moment having arrived for him to speak, as these formalities were part of the ceremonial dignity befitting nobility. "But what difficulties do you encounter? How much grain do you require?" "Thanks to your grace, my lord. This year's harvest has been decent. We shall survive the winter without needing grain for the time being." "Then what is the matter?" Eddard Stark inquired, perplexed. He had not reviewed Maester Luwin's report, deeming it unnecessary since he would need to inquire again regardless. Typically, the villages under Winterfell would approach for food supplies, and Eddard would provide them with sustenance for the winter, as it was one of the Lord's responsibilities to protect the common folk. Allowing them to perish from cold or hunger would constitute a grave dereliction of duty, and if a noble from Winterfell were to face such misfortune, he, as the protector of the North, would be obligated to impose sanctions. Ryle appeared somewhat anxious, perhaps due to facing his lord or recalling that night, while Kay displayed no trace of arrogance. "My lord, the situation is thus. 2 weeks ago, our party ventured into the Wolfwood for winter hunting and observed a multitude of wild beasts fleeing from the forest. Even the hibernating cave bears departed from their territories. Initially, we thought it was a temporary occurrence, but they have not left and have been roaming near several villages, wreaking havoc upon livestock and properties. Their numbers are overwhelming, and we lack sufficient manpower thus. We hope you can dispatch a contingent of guards to help us drive them away or eliminate them. Rahl humbly bowed his head, sincerely seeking assistance. Kay hastily followed suit. Upon hearing this, Eddard Stark's brow remained as unyielding as the icy fortifications of the wall. This is a reasonable request. I shall personally lead a guard to fulfill my duty as the protector of the North. My lord, we are immensely grateful. May the old gods bless House Stark. Rahl and Kay were filled with astonishment, having never anticipated that the Duke Stark would personally head the expedition, and they expressed their heartfelt gratitude as they exited the council hall. The decision made by Eddard Stark surprised several of the Stark ladies. It was uncharacteristic of him, yet they refrained from voicing their thoughts in the presence of outsiders. As the council concluded, the Stark ladies gathered around Eddard Stark. My lord, might you reconsider personally leading the expedition to the Wolfwood? Bachelor Luwin was the first to speak. Next to him, Master Roderick added, My lord, I am more than capable of leading the guards to drive away these beasts. There is no need for you to intervene. The Stark ladies remained silent, quietly observing, as the expectant Catelyn desired to remain close to her partner at all times. Eddard Stark regarded the three of them and explained his reasoning. The Wolfwood of Long Lake is my direct territory. I bear the responsibility of safeguarding them, which is also my honor. Furthermore, Robb is now 13. It is time for him to learn these necessary lessons. The presence of various threats, including the likes of the dire bears, lurking within the woods, could not be ignored. As the protector of the North, he could not afford to be negligent, though he chose not to articulate this concern, fearing it would trouble his wife. Upon hearing Eddard Stark's words, the three fell silent, though Bachelor Luwin appeared to sense Eddard's underlying thoughts, opening his mouth to speak, yet ultimately refraining. Roderick, summon 100 guards. We shall depart at dawn tomorrow, equipped with ample bows and hunting traps, Eddard Stark commanded, then turned to his wife, saying, Catelyn, during my absence, you and Bachelor Luwin will manage my duties. Should any issues arise, we shall address them upon my return. Catelyn shot Eddard a withering glance. Have you forgotten? It was I who taught you how to handle affairs in the first place. A hint of amusement flickered across Eddard Stark's stoic face. In the training grounds of Winterfell, the scarred Jory Castle, who had once besieged the castle of Pike in the Iron Islands, was instructing the just 13-year-old heir, Robb Stark, in the art of swordsmanship, while recounting tales of the battle at Pike. Of course, Robb was not alone. He was joined by Eddard's foster son, Theon Greyjoy, and his illegitimate son, Jon Snow. As Jory passionately relayed his exploits in the Iron Islands, laced with disdain for the local lord, Theon's expression darkened with anger, for that lord was his own father. It was due to that very conflict that he, at the tender age of 8, was brought to Winterfell by Eddard Stark, ostensibly as a foster son, yet truly as a hostage. 6 years had since elapsed. Unable to bear Jory's tales any longer, Theon set aside his wooden sword and took up a bow, retreating to practice on his own. He was acutely aware of his precarious position here. He was overshadowed by those who were born to serve House Stark. Meanwhile, Jon Snow wielded a wooden sword as an illegitimate child. He did not receive Jory's specialized training. Nevertheless, he displayed a commendable proficiency, suggesting a natural talent for the swordplay. In truth, with his dark hair, Jon bore a closer resemblance to a Stark than the red-haired Robb did. Emerging from the council chamber, Eddard Stark stood upon the walkway, a smile gracing his lips as he observed the children flourishing before him. Lord Stark. The first to notice him was Theon, diligently practicing his archery, who promptly greeted him with respect. Lord Stark. Both Jory and Jon paused to offer their salutation in unison. Father, Robb Stark exclaimed, wielding a wooden sword with excitement. I managed to exchange a few blows with Jory. Eddard descended the stairs, approaching the group, and affectionately ruffled Robb's hair. Is that so? Quite commendable for your age, but you must continue to strive for improvement. Yes, father. I will work even harder. Robb, buoyed by the praise, brimmed with enthusiasm. Eddard then turned his gaze towards the somewhat sullen Jon Snow. After all these years, the sight of him stirred complex feelings within Eddard, particularly due to his wife's animosity toward Jon. Well done. Thank you, Lord Stark. It is Jory who teaches well, Jon replied, having learned from a young age the art of decorum and restraint, as well as the skill of concealing his emotions. Nodding, Eddard Stark maintained his customary stoicism. Children, once your practice concludes, tidy up your belongings. Tomorrow morning, we shall venture to the villages near the Long Lake Wolfwood to cull the beasts. At this pronouncement, Robb and Theon exchanged excited smiles, while Jon lowered his gaze. Jon, You shall join us as well. Eddard Stark addressed Jon Snow directly. Jon's head snapped up, astonishment etched on his face, quickly replaced by a beaming and elated smile. Yes, Lord Stark. Robb approached Jon, tousling his hair. His feelings for this brother ran deep. Unlike his mother's hostility privately, he looked after Jon with great care. The two boys soon began to spar again, brandishing their wooden swords like knights. The following morning, Robb, Theon, and Jon donned their tailored leather armor, ensuring they were warm enough for the day ahead. They arrived early at the stables to personally tend to the horses, preparing thoroughly for their outing, though they occasionally stifled yawns. Observing the three children, who had hardly slept a wink due to their excitement, Eddard shook his head slightly. He embraced his wife, mounted his horse, and set forth with the children towards the city gates. Lady Stark beamed with pride as she watched her husband and her son, who had matured into a fine young man. However, her countenance darkened as her gaze fell upon the dark-haired Jon Snow, a surge of anger bubbling within her. It was, after all, an understandable sentiment. Few could tolerate the notion of their husband returning from battle with a bastard child, especially one raised alongside their own. If it were another lady, Jon Snow would likely have encountered numerous perils during his upbringing, such as falling rocks, wild beasts, and descents. It was no small feat for Lady Stark to tolerate his growth, even during Jon's bout with chickenpox. She prayed to the gods for the survival of this motherless child. Although she ultimately went against her promise to the divine, humanity is inherently contradictory, and one can only say she was an ordinary woman. Outside the castle, the cavalry of the Night's Watch, led by Jory, was fully armed and lined up in formation, while the supply train had already departed under the guidance of the old hunter, Leaf. As if sensing the departure of the Lord of Winterfell, the snow that had persisted for 2 months ceased, revealing a glimmer of sunlight after a prolonged absence. Let's depart. Upon Ed Stark's command, Jory led a contingent of cavalry to clear the way, followed closely by Ed Stark, who nudged his horse forward, accompanied by his 3 children at the heart of the formation, which constituted the basic protective arrangement. Confident in the riding abilities of his children, Ed Stark urged them to hasten. Quicken your pace, children. Winter is upon us. Winter is upon us. The Night's Watch echoed in their native tongue. The 3 children joined in, their voices raised, a moment that would forever be etched in their memories, as if this instant marked their transformation from boys to men. Thus, a torrent surged forth through the snow-clad expanse of the north, the banner of the direwolf fluttering fiercely in the frigid wind. Chapter 3. A first encounter. The destination was not far, and after a swift journey of approximately 2 hours, we arrived. Indeed, as the hunter had indicated, there were herds of beasts rampaging, and the situation had escalated. Several villages along the way lay in ruins, and the guard had already slain a dozen forest wolves in the wilderness, leaving a small contingent to clear the remnants of the beasts in those villages while hastening toward our goal. Eddard Stark's countenance resembled the unyielding ice of the Great Wall, for the circumstances were far graver than he had anticipated. Swift action was imperative, or the winter would bring dire consequences for the common folk of his domain. Though the beasts were merely beasts, their sheer numbers posed a threat. However, with the collaboration of bows, spears, and soldiers, the villages overrun by the creatures were reclaimed within a few short hours. Eddard commanded that all ferocious beasts be slain, while the young and pregnant animals were driven away. They established watchmen along the route to guard against any returning threats, sending them back to another forest, while fortifying the perimeters of the villages to prevent incursions by straying beasts. In the best room of the village, gathered around a crackling fire, Eddard Stark and his 3 children reveled in their spoils. Robb, did you see? I shot that lynx right through the skull with a single arrow. When we return to Winterfell, that exquisite pelt shall adorn my fine Valyrian steel sword. With a triumphant slice of meat, Theon boasted of his exploits. Robb, not to be outdone, declared that 4 wolves were as easily dispatched as a house cat. The warmth of the fire seemed to thaw a fraction of the ice on Eddard Stark's face. He turned to the lone, silent child. Jon, what have you? I killed 2 wolves and a mountain leopard, Jon replied, swallowing a piece of roasted meat. Nodding solemnly, Eddard took a sip of the somewhat bitter ale, a sincere offering from the local villagers. His demeanor remained grave. Remember, children, as I have previously stated, we are not here merely for sport. Our purpose is to ensure the safety of our subjects. Robb, especially you, fixating solely on hunting nearly cost the guide his life at the jaws of a wolf. Chastened. Robb lowered his head, understanding the weight of his responsibilities as heir, a lesson imparted since his youth. I understand, father. The atmosphere grew heavy, an unusual contrast to the joviality often associated with Eddard Stark. At that moment, Jory entered, arranging the guards. The cold wind swept in alongside him. "My lord, all is arranged. Jim is leading a team to drive away the beasts, and the guards by the forest's edge are on high alert for any further incursions. We can depart and return to Winterfell before nightfall." "No, we shall remain here for the night," Eddard Stark countered Jory's suggestion. "Beasts possess territorial instincts. Even hibernating bears should not be stirring at this hour. There must be a significant threat to provoke such behavior. Jory, dispatch a scouting party into the woods to investigate and return before dark to ascertain if anything unusual is afoot." At this, Jory comprehended the true purpose of his lord's expedition and voiced no objections, turning to organize his men accordingly. Creaking and crunching beneath the weight of snow, the father of Janner Ebers, a man adorned with a full beard, was elevated to knighthood by the Lord during the War of Usurpers. He himself was promoted within House Stark's ranks, serving as a scout and later rising to the rank of captain due to his valor in the Battle of the Iron Islands. As the dense forest became unsuitable for horseback travel, he and his men proceeded on foot, tasked by their lord to investigate anomalies near Long Lake. 5 scouts advanced 100 meters apart, following the tracks of wild beasts deeper into the woods. Just as they were disheartened by the lack of discoveries and the encroaching darkness, Janner and his fellow scouts reached the lakeside and quickly concealed themselves behind trees upon spotting something that did not belong to the ancient, secluded woods. A wooden cabin, expansive enough to serve as a training ground, stood by the lake, its every crevice filled with moss, and wisps of smoke wafted from the chimney, indicating that it was inhabited. Could it be wildlings? Janner signaled for his men to gather, leaving 2 on guard. He unsheathed his long sword and stealthily approached the cabin, for they had never shown mercy to wildlings. Just as they prepared to kick down the door, a resonant voice interrupted them. "There is no need for such rudeness." The door swung open, revealing Gedwin, clad in a grand robe of blue adorned with golden edges and embroidered with suns, his chest exposed. Janner paused, taken aback by Gedwin's attire, which contradicted their assumptions. Wildlings would not don such finery. The 3 raised their swords and spears towards Gedwin, while the 2 on guard knocked their arrows, aiming cautiously. Meanwhile, Gedwin pondered if these individuals were indeed the native inhabitants of this world. Their garb and weaponry appeared medieval, yet he sensed no peculiar energy emanating from them. Having resided in this realm for over 2 months, Gedwin had chosen seclusion within the forest, constructing a wooden cabin. On one hand, his newly acquired body required time to recuperate, his strength diminished. On the other, after enduring struggles in the world of Elden Ring, he longed for tranquility, his spirit weary from battles fought in his previous existence. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Janner's voice broke through Gedwin's reverie, demanding an answer. Gedwin furrowed his brow. It had been long since anyone dared to address him in such a manner. While he could embody the sun, embracing all, he would not hesitate to unleash punitive wrath upon those who offended him. Noting Gedwin's silence, Janner stepped forward, pressing his sword against Gedwin's throat. Despite Gedwin's towering stature, he appeared unarmed and thus posed no threat in Janner's eyes. In a flash, Gedwin seized Janner by the throat, lifting him effortlessly. That is not how one wields a sword. He swiftly disarmed Janner, tossing him aside and advancing towards the 2 spear wielders, effortlessly deflecting the arrows aimed at him. The 2 men, watching Gedwin approach like an impending avalanche, felt an overwhelming pressure that momentarily robbed them of breath. Observing the 2 individuals devoid of fighting spirit, Gedwin seized their long spears, showing no intent to intimidate them. He cast aside his sword and directed his gaze toward the distant pair, raising his spear and hurling it in their direction. With a resounding thud and a crack, the spear did not strike the 2 but instead cleaved through the colossal tree that sheltered them, causing it to topple slowly without crashing down upon them. The spear disintegrated into splinters upon impact, yet fragments of the shattered steel tip grazed one man's face. By the old gods! As Gedwin hurled the spear, Janner felt as though his very entrails were lamenting, his bones creaking. Witnessing Gedwin shatter a massive tree from nearly 100 meters away with a single throw left him in a state of bewilderment, with only one thought echoing in his mind: by the old gods. Observing their reactions, Gedwin confirmed a truth. His displayed prowess surpassed the norms of this world, which afforded him a modicum of relief, at least ensuring his safety. "Who on earth are you?" Janner inquired, his voice trembling, devoid of prior arrogance. Should one not first offer their name before inquiring of others? Gedwin planted another spear into the earth and stated, "First, let your people approach and disarm themselves. Perhaps I might allow you entry into my abode. Otherwise, whether by my hand or the bitter cold, you shall meet your demise, and then we can converse properly." Gedwin sought to comprehend this world, and these individuals did not appear malicious. They were merely reckless warriors, akin to many under Gedwin's command. After witnessing Gedwin's formidable strength, the five harbored no thoughts of resistance, sensing no hostility emanating from him. Janna pondered further, his concern lying in the possibility of not returning by nightfall, which would prompt Lord Stark to come in search of them, rendering them as helpless prey. The rustic cabin, albeit modest, boasted adequate infrastructure, with a blanket woven from an unknown animal spread upon the floor before the fireplace. "What are you standing there for? Aren't you cold?" Gedwin remarked, seating himself in a chair, beckoning them closer. "Relax. Had you not drawn your swords upon me, I would not have intended to strike. Moreover, if I truly wished you harm, would you possess the ability to resist?" Though his words stung their pride, they were indeed a reflection of reality. At that moment, Janna found himself able to think more clearly. The man before them was clearly no savage. Even among the wealthiest lords of the South, he had never encountered such an opulent cloak, let alone the peculiar items within the cabin, such as the round orbs providing illumination and objects crafted from gold. As commonplace as stones outside, why would such a wealthy and powerful figure appear in this remote wilderness? Janna could not fathom it. In terms of living standards, Gedwin held high expectations. He required comfort, and most items within the room were collected or set aside from the borderlands, primarily consisting of weapons and armor. "My lord, I beg your pardon for my intrusion. We merely sought to trace the footsteps of the wildlings and did not intend to cause such a misunderstanding." Jenner slightly bowed, the pain in his body causing his speech to be somewhat halting. "What is your name?" Gedwin took a sip of wine, a brew crafted by the Samir people. Its icy entrance followed by a fiery aftertaste, quite to his liking. "Jenner Ebers, my lord," he answered respectfully, and then each of his four companions introduced themselves in turn. Nodding, Gedwin inquired, "Could you enlighten me about the situation regarding the wildlings?" The group was momentarily taken aback. Was there really a need for anyone to elaborate on the wildlings' condition? Who among the Seven Kingdoms was not aware? In truth, Gedwin could have accessed their memories without consent, yet he refrained, primarily due to his current lack of control over his powers. A careless exertion could lead to the ruin of their minds. Gedwin had no desire to arrive in this world and immediately become adversaries with the natives. After a moment of contemplation, Jenner began to relay the situation regarding the wildlings. Thus, in a question-and-answer format, Jenner discovered that the man before him was unfamiliar with the basic circumstances of Westeros. For the sake of Lord Stark's safety, he concealed certain information, merely stating that they were soldiers of the guard tasked with patrolling against the wildlings. Such a ruse could hardly elude Gedwin. He gleaned fragmented insights, such as the North, the Wall, wildlings, the King and King's Landing, and knights, all significant terms. These words rang familiar, yet Gedwin could not recall their origin. There was no need for further inquiry, as he surmised that this realm resembled a medieval Western epic. "I apologize, night has fallen, and I must impose upon you to spend the night in the adjacent woodshed. We shall depart at dawn," Gedwin stated, as he casually handed a bottle of wine to Jenner. "Warm yourself with this. There are blankets over there, and the woodshed is spacious enough for you to kindle a fire for warmth." After a moment's thought, Jenner accepted the bottle, recognizing that when one is under a roof, one must bow their head in gratitude for the Lord's generosity, and expressed hope that they could report back to the guard by the morrow. Gedwin smiled and nodded, pondering whether they would remember him by dawn, for he had discreetly added a tincture of forgetfulness to the wine, capable of erasing a day's memories. He was not yet ready to engage with outsiders. The group made their way outside, when suddenly Jenner inquired, "My lord, you have yet to share your name with us." Before the campfire, Gedwin did not turn back, his voice reaching their ears. Chapter 4. A renewed encounter. The northern skies at night were perpetually shrouded in clouds, with only the moon appearing intermittently. Eddard Stark distinctly recalled the last time he beheld a sky full of stars. It was the night before he departed from King's Landing. Eddard relished this solitary moment. Since becoming the Guardian of the North, such opportunities had become rare. "My lord, the scouting party has not yet returned. We have only discovered their horses." Jory, returning from the search, dismounted and reported to Eddard, who awaited at the village entrance. Eddard Stark's countenance hardened into an unyielding frost. After a moment of contemplation, he issued a command for 20 guards to remain on watch until morning, while the rest would accompany him into the woods in search of their whereabouts. "My lord, it is far too perilous within, and the circumstances remain unclear. Perhaps I should lead a contingent instead," Jory hastily advised. Eddard Stark, however, dismissed the suggestion resolutely, stating, "These soldiers were entrusted to me, and I shall ensure their safe return. Come morning, let someone escort Robb and the others back." understanding his lord's temperament all too well. Jory nodded in acquiescence and proceeded to convey the orders. Taking a deep breath of the northern air, Eddard Stark returned indoors. His gaze drawn to the 3 children huddled together in disarray. Their presence somewhat alleviated his troubled spirit. As he sat before the crackling fire, he pondered the mysteries that lay within the woods. The decision to send Rob and the others back was a precautionary measure, in the event of any misfortune befalling him. The near-adult Rob would serve as a legitimate heir, ensuring the North could stabilize despite any turmoil, rather than leaving it unprepared, relying solely on bloodline and legal claims to restrain the volatile lords. Casting a glance at John, who lay beneath Rob's weight, Eddard's emotions grew complex. Should he meet an untimely fate, allowing John to remain oblivious to his lineage and live under the guise of a bastard might be the most favorable outcome. In truth, the name Gadwin signifies the god of victory, akin to the meanings associated with his father, Gofrey, representing prosperity, peace, and love, a significant emblem of the golden lineage. When asked about his name by Janna, Gadwin inadvertently misconstrued it as a surname. Perhaps after years of being referred to as Golden Gadwin, he had grown accustomed to it, though he preferred the moniker Golden Sunday. In the dead of night, Gadwin opened the door to the wood shed, revealing 5 burly men slumbering soundly around the fire. The sentry among them succumbing to alcohol's embrace, leaving behind half a bottle. It was remarkable that such potent drink could incapacitate even demigods. Yet these men considered it a feat to consume a single cup. Grabbing a long stick, Gadwin deftly bound the 5 together, hoisting their gear as he made his way to the opposite slope. He intended to dispose of them at a distance and erase any trace of their presence. He harbored no concern for their survival in the frigid wilderness. That single cup of liquor would surely keep them warm through the night without incident. Upon awakening, they would have no recollection of ever encountering Gadwin. It must be said that Gadwin's plan was astute. In the borderlands, regardless of the titles bestowed upon him, he firmly believed that prudence was his greatest virtue. As the saying goes, women and children may afford to be careless, but men must not. Though revered by all as a beloved demigod in the borderlands, he felt that the reason for such affection stemmed precisely from the aspect of himself that remained distinctly mortal. Much like his father, Gofrey, who garnered respect, admiration, and longing, even among demigods like Lathane, his mother, the eternal goddess Marika, was worshipped solely in reverence. Some argue that it is the emotions possessed by demigods that render the golden law imperfect. However, Gadwin believes that it is precisely these human qualities that imbue the world with vibrant diversity. He does not, however, deny the existence of malevolence. Thus, Gadwin has perpetually sought a form of freedom within a relative order, not the extremes of left or right, but a harmonious state that encompasses all things, good and evil, right and wrong, beauty and ugliness, while firmly eschewing the chaotic and barbaric development of 100 forms. Regrettably, after a lifetime of striving, Gadwin has yet to uncover that elusive answer. For demigods, food and sleep are no longer necessities. Perhaps the newly formed body requires energy, and Gadwin has regained these needs. He can now consume an entire adult deer in a single meal and has also rediscovered some culinary skills from his early days, albeit at the cost of wasting considerable ingredients. In this pursuit, Gadwin has discovered unexpected joys, previously consumed by relentless training and scheming, and indulging in music as a mere hobby without the necessity of hunting. In the depths of the forest, he has yet to experience boredom. With a self-fashioned fishing rod in hand, he sets out in a small boat to fish at the center of the lake, evoking the poetic imagery of solitary fishing amidst the winter's chill. Outside the forest, Eddard Stark gazes at the 5 horses in the trees, the furrows on his brow deepening. My lord, it did not snow last night. Their footprints remain. Jory keenly spots the scout's traces. Nodding, Eddard Stark commands, dismount, and advance along the tracks. Form 2 teams to watch the flanks. The soldiers, upon receiving the order, promptly spring into action. 2 men lead the way, following the footprints, while others proceed cautiously on either side. Eddard Stark and Jory find themselves at the heart of the formation. After about an hour's march, a disturbance is sensed ahead. My lord, we have found Janna and the others. A scout reports as he approaches Eddard Stark. Quickening his pace, Eddard Stark comes upon 5 men sprawled on the ground, snoring, their gear discarded nearby, igniting a surge of fury within him. Jory hastily steps forward, kicking them awake. You worthless swine, rise at once. Janna and his companions blink awake, startled by the grim visage of Eddard Stark. My lord, do you require something from me? Janna Ebers. You once pledged your loyalty before the old gods. Is this your interpretation of loyalty? Eddard Stark could scarcely believe that his subordinate, whom he had worried about throughout the night, had instead indulged in slumber within the forest. Taken aback, Janna glances around and asserts, "My lord, I have always been steadfast in my loyalty. No one can question that. Then why did you defy my orders?" Eddard Stark's expression remains icy, the cold steel at his waist stirring restlessly. "What orders?" Janna falters again, attempting to recall the specifics. The more he thinks, the more his head pounds. Even rolling on the ground in anguish, the side effect of the forgetting elixir, which prohibits contemplation of forgotten matters. The two men behind him also exhibited similar behavior. "My lord, something is amiss. They do not seem to be feigning. It appears they have lost some memories." Jon Snow recalled instances he had witnessed on the battlefield where individuals, having suffered head injuries, had lost their recollections, yet these men bore no signs of trauma. Observing the scene, Eddard Stark instinctively tightened his grip on ice. His intuition suggested that Jenna and the others were not deceiving him, while reason dictated that it was implausible for seemingly healthy individuals to suffer from amnesia. "Have someone escort them back and ensure they are properly attended to. I shall address this matter upon my return." Eddard Stark resolved not to dwell on the issue, instead casting a grave gaze into the depths of the forest. It was only natural to feel apprehension in the face of the unknown. The group restructured and proceeded onward, heading towards Long Lake. In the center of the lake, Gedwyn, bare-chested, remained unfazed by the chill. Throughout the morning, his modest boat had yielded numerous fish weighing over several tens of pounds. Gedwyn mused that if the fishermen from his previous life were to learn of this, they would undoubtedly pursue him for directions. In truth, one could easily use dragon lightning to incapacitate all the fish in the lake. Yet the exertion required for such a feat, alongside his limited rune power, dissuaded him. Besides, Gedwyn sought enjoyment in the experience, rendering such measures unnecessary. While reveling in this delightful moment, Gedwyn's ears perked up as he caught wind of some sounds. He reeled in his fishing rod and steered his boat towards the shore. "My lord, there is a wooden cabin ahead, and there is a person on the lake," the scout reported to Eddard Stark. Eddard quickly advanced a few steps, scrutinizing the cabin and the figure upon the water. "A wildling, perhaps? Have a team circle around. We shall reveal ourselves and subdue him once he reaches the shore." "Yes." Thus, as Gedwyn disembarked, a squad of soldiers emerged from behind the cabin, brandishing spears and swords, surrounding him while shouting for him to remain still. One soldier approached Gedwyn with a rope, evidently intending to bind him. Aware that trouble was imminent, Gedwyn sighed, surprised by the swiftness of the confrontation. Gazing at the approaching soldier, he thought, "Must I resort to violence?" With lightning speed, he drew the sword from the soldier's waist and, with a swift kick, sent him flying, though Gedwyn had only exerted enough force to incapacitate him without causing serious harm. Faced with the onslaught of spears and swords, Gedwyn decided to evade rather than retaliate, recognizing that his physique was impervious to such weapons. He merely needed to conceal his combat prowess. His robust form moved with an elegance reminiscent of a butterfly flitting through dense assaults, eschewing the use of his sword and relying solely on his feet, disarming several assailants within mere moments. Casting a glance at those sprawled on the ground, groaning yet not mortally wounded, Gedwyn nodded, acknowledging the challenge of controlling his strength to avoid fatality. He slanted his sword into the earth and called out, "Friends over there, do come forth and meet me." Not far behind the trees, the archers had taken their positions, awaiting Eddard Stark's command. As Ed Stark gazed upon the imposing figure of the golden-haired man, steadfast amidst a throng of lamenting soldiers, he felt a shiver of recognition. This display of personal valor was reminiscent of the legendary knight he had encountered before the tower in Dorne, the fabled Don, Arthur Dane. "My lord, you must not approach." Jory, fully aware of the formidable prowess of Godwyn and the capabilities of his own men, interposed himself before Ed Stark. These were seasoned veterans, survivors of war, and he felt compelled to ensure the safety of their lord. After a moment of contemplation, Ed Stark commanded his soldiers to lower their bows. He had refrained from striking a lethal blow, sheathing his sword as well. He did not wish to present himself as a savage nor exhibit any hostility. While uncertain of the man's origins, he recognized that neglecting the situation could pose a perpetual threat. Resolute, Ed Stark disregarded his bodyguard's objections and stepped forward, his loyal retinue following closely as they approached Godwyn. Chapter 5. A sincere refusal. It seemed that trouble had a knack for finding him. The essence of seclusion was meant to be undisturbed, yet Godwyn had been visited twice in quick succession. He pondered whether it was time for a change of scenery. From Godwyn's vantage point, a contingent of guards encircled a man clad in a fur cloak, a broadsword at his side, whose plain appearance belied a certain steely resolve in his dark hair and gray eyes. This group, brandishing swords and spears and bearing a banner embroidered with a gray wolf's head, approached him with caution. Godwin remained still, merely observing. Despite his calm demeanor, the guards felt an intangible pressure in the presence of Godwin. "State your identity," Ed Stark called out as he halted approximately 5 paces from Godwin. "I am Godwin Gordo, a wanderer far from my homeland," he replied after a moment's reflection. "I mean no harm. I acted only to ensure my safety." He then inquired, "And you are?" Upon hearing Godwin's words, the tension among the guards eased slightly. Jory stepped forward proudly, declaring, "Before you stands Lord Eddard Stark, Duke of Winterfell, Warden of the North, and Protector of the North." Upon hearing this familiar name and title, Godwin experienced a moment of clarity. Momentarily taken aback as he beheld the wolf-headed banner, he finally recalled the identity of the man before him and recognized the world in which he found himself. George R.R. Martin's realm of A Song of Ice and Fire. That scoundrel Martin has caused me no small amount of trouble. It was worth noting that the architect of the narrative within the Elden Ring universe was indeed George R.R. Martin, perhaps the very one who pinned Godwin's demise. Now, having entered the domain of the notorious Martin, Godwin suspected that his previous life, having concluded the lackluster finale of Game of Thrones, had caught the attention of the author. Observing Ed Stark's seasoned visage, Godwin was certain he had stepped into the television adaptation of the novel, a world rife with dragons and magic. This realization brought him a measure of comfort. Based on the series, as long as he regained his strength, the only threats he faced would be the elusive gods. With the Night King merely a contender. Primarily, Gedwin was uncertain whether his fateful spear could be effective against the Night King. Even if it proved ineffective, he still possessed dragon glass and Valyrian steel. As for dragons, Gedwin was no stranger to their demise. The dragons here were far less formidable than the ancient dragons of the lands beyond. The only concern lay with certain dark magics, which Gedwin's current rune powers were insufficient to counter. A sense of melancholy enveloped him, for at his core, he was akin to his father, Gofrey, a warrior yearning for battle. This world seemed devoid of adversaries capable of igniting his fervor. Observing Gedwin, who remained unresponsive and lost in thought after the introductions, Jory drew his sword, intent on defending his lord's honor. "Kneel before the Lord of the North, you insolent one." Upon hearing these words, Gedwin furrowed his brow. In times past, such an affront would have elicited a swift retribution, obliterating the offender with a strike of dragon fire. However, prudence dictated a more subdued approach. He turned to Eddard Stark, reflecting on the customs of his homeland. "I kneel to the heavens, the earth, and my parents. No one else shall compel me to bend the knee. If you wish to engage me in combat, then I, Gedwin, shall bestow upon you this honor." This declaration stemmed from an unwavering confidence in his own strength. To subdue Gedwin, even at a fraction of his full power, would require 100 soldiers of exceptional skill and physical prowess. The surrounding guards stood ready, as if facing a formidable foe. For them, the notion of besieging a single individual was a matter of great disgrace. Yet, in tacit agreement, they raised their swords and spears. "Stand down," Eddard Stark commanded as he stepped forth from the protective circle of his men. "Gedwin Gordo, I respect the traditions of your homeland and welcome you to the north. However, I must first clarify certain matters." Hearing this, Gedwin lowered his combat readiness. His unexpected arrival was indeed ill-advised, and he pledged to speak openly. Naturally, matters as extraordinary as traversing worlds would require discretion. "Come inside. There is warmth and wine awaiting you." Gedwin opened the door to the wooden cabin, which also housed a warming area for the guards in the adjoining woodshed and kitchen. After a moment's contemplation, Eddard Stark nodded. Beyond sensing Gedwin's formidable presence, he discerned an air of nobility about him, though caution remained paramount. "Attend to the injured guards, Jory. Accompany me." Upon entering the dwelling, Eddard Stark, who typically eschewed opulence, could not suppress a sharp intake of breath. Luxurious furs served as carpets beneath his feet, while goblets, pitchers, platters, and candlesticks were crafted from pure gold. The ceiling bore shimmering orbs of light, and the walls displayed exquisite weapons, glinting with a chilling brilliance. As a warrior, Eddard recognized the exceptional quality. Even during his incursion into the Targaryen treasury, he had never encountered such finely wrought armaments, rivaling the famed Valyrian steel blades of the great houses. This now rules out the possibility of Gedwin being a savage, yet gazing at Gedwin's radiant golden hair, Eddard Stark inquired, "Gorder, that is not a surname of any noble from the Seven Kingdoms. From whence do you hail?" "I am not a noble of the Seven Kingdoms, as you describe. In truth, I am rather uncertain of my whereabouts," Gedwin replied, pouring a cup of wine for Eddard Stark. "As for Jory, Gedwin held no fondness for this man who had offended him. Eddard Stark furrowed his brow but accepted the wine offered by Gedwin, settling into the chair opposite him. A much more comfortable respite compared to the hard wooden seat. Then, where are you from? How did you arrive here? I hope you understand that I must ensure the safety of my subjects. Nodding, Gedwin replied with a smile, that is your duty. I appreciate those who are diligent in their responsibilities. After a moment's contemplation, Gedwin organized his thoughts. Under Eddard Stark's gaze, he raised his cup and took a sip of wine, staring into the fire. By this direction, I must be from the east. From a place further east than the Dothraki Sea, known as the Land of the Crossing. Further east than Essos, you mean Sithorios? Eddard Stark murmured. For the records of the Seven Kingdoms regarding that region were scant, merely noting the continent's name. He then asked, how did you come to be here? And how many accompanied you? I know not what you call it. Only that a company of about a dozen of us set sail northward, taking a long route that took us 7 or 8 years to reach this place. Gedwin had long forgotten the names of those lands. Such matters were best cloaked in half-truths to avoid detection. Shaking his wine glass, he added, now, I am alone. I am sorry. Eddard Stark discerned no flaw in Gedwin's demeanor. This northern man uncharacteristically expressed an apology. Why did you leave your home? With a deep sigh, Gedwin recalled his life in the world of Elden Ring. War, an unending cycle of conflict. It seemed Eddard Stark, remembering something, could not help but exhale a heavy sigh as well. War is always thus, forcing people to do what they do not wish. After speaking, Eddard Stark, disregarding Jory's objections, took a large gulp of wine, which felt like swallowing a piece of red-hot charcoal, causing him to cough incessantly. Yet, he felt the warmth of the wine dispelling the chill within him. What a potent drink. I should have warned you to take it slow, Gedwin chuckled, observing Eddard Stark's flushed face. This is the favorite drink of the warriors from my homeland, blood of heroes. Taking a deep breath, Eddard Stark regained his composure, a flush now adorning his previously icy visage. Indeed, such fine wine, coupled with these luxuries, suggests you must be of noble birth in your homeland, at least a marquis. Haha, you have miscalculated. I was once a prince. In times past, it would have been you who bowed before me. Seeing Eddard Stark's defenses ease, Gedwin jested. The conjecture was confirmed, and a sense of assurance enveloped the inebriated Eddard Stark, prompting him to indulge in a rare jest. Perhaps if you were to bestow upon me a few barrels of this wine, I might extend a courteous greeting to this exiled prince. Initially, Eddard Stark had presumed that the golden-haired Gendry hailed from the Lannisters. However, he recognized that Tywin Lannister would never reside in such opulence. Though he harbored disdain for the Lannisters, they were, at least nominally, all subjects of the king. More importantly, he sensed a deep-seated sense of honor emanating from Gendry, a notion perhaps rooted in the instincts of a warrior, leading him to trust Gendry's assertions. Such greed is excessive. A single bottle would suffice as a token of our meeting, Gendry remarked as he donned a grand robe and retrieved a large chest from beneath the bed. Actually emerging from a storage necklace, he tossed a bottle of wine to Eddard Stark, who caught it with a hint of trepidation. Unaccustomed to indulgence, he took a sip and was utterly captivated by its flavor. Subsequently, Gendry opened the chest, revealing a brilliant cache of gold. I find myself in the north as an uninvited guest. However, in my homeland, it is customary not to arrive empty-handed. Consider these my gifts. Eddard Stark, instead of being overwhelmed like Jory, remained composed upon witnessing the chest filled with gold sufficient to cover a decade's taxes for the entire north. He calmly inquired, what is it that you desire? If possible, I wish to rent this forest. After being away from home for 7 or 8 years, I find myself weary. This appears to be a suitable refuge. Furthermore, might I borrow a few books? I am, after all, quite unfamiliar with this continent. Beyond that, I have no further requests. Faced with the allure of gold and fine wine, Eddard Stark pondered momentarily before resolutely declining. I am afraid I cannot acquiesce. My lord, Jory began, but Eddard interrupted. As you stated, you are a guest. Perhaps you are unaware, but in Westeros, there exists a custom known as the right of guest, which dictates that during your stay in the north, I shall provide you with bread and salt and a warm abode. In return, we must not harm one another. To do so would invite the scorn of the new gods and the old. After a sip of wine, Eddard continued, moreover, an unsettling situation has arisen. It seems some fright has driven the beasts from the forest, causing strife in the nearby villages. I have come to address this matter, for this place is neither secure nor suitable for habitation. In truth, Eddard Stark could have easily concealed this information, taken the gold, and departed. For the price was merely an unproductive forest. Yet, as a duke, and, more importantly, as a knight, his pride forbade such an act. despite the chest of gold having the potential to provide a warm and bountiful winter for all the people of the north. Chapter 6. A visit to Winterfell. Gendry was somewhat taken aback. He knew Eddard Stark would be candid, but he had not anticipated such forthrightness. In truth, such a decision is deemed inadequate for a lord, yet it is precisely this quality that compels the lords of the north, as stubborn as stones in a mire, to place their unwavering trust in Eddard Stark. Godwyn chuckled, initially believing that the people of the north would mirror the chill of the weather here. Instead, he discovered they were akin to a warmth hidden beneath a cold exterior. Seemingly uncomfortable with such praise, Eddard took a sip of wine, remarking that he was merely fulfilling an ancient covenant. As if struck by a thought, Godwyn inquired, "How severe is the damage to the villages this time?" Although Eddard harbored some curiosity regarding Godwyn's interest in this matter, he turned to Jory and asked, "What is the rough estimate?" Recently, 2 villages had suffered greatly, with their livestock devoured by wild beasts, alongside damage to homes and grain. The losses across several villages amounted to approximately 10 golden dragons, Jory relayed. Upon hearing this, Godwyn retrieved a gold brick emblazoned with a sun emblem from a chest and tossed it to Jory, stating, "This calamity is likely due to my presence. To deter beast attacks, I had scattered a powder made from dragon excrement around the area. Let this serve as compensation for the afflicted." Eddard Stark, upon hearing this, experienced a moment of clarity, but his expression turned grave as he tightly gripped his wine cup and asked, "Have you ever seen a dragon?" Shaking his head, Godwyn returned to his seat. "However, I have come across remnants collected by others, though there are few left. I have yet to witness a dragon in this world." This statement was a blend of truth and deception. It was not merely the powder that deterred beasts, but rather the ancient dragon, Valsancus, residing within Godwyn. Even in the absence of its corporeal form, the innate suppression emanated through the dragon's soul, a discovery Godwyn had only recently made. Thus, he devised a plan to conceal Valsancus's essence more deeply, nurturing it near the center rune, hoping for its swift awakening. Having received the answers he sought, Eddard Stark visibly exhaled in relief. The legendary tale of Conqueror Aegon Targaryen's subjugation of the 7 kingdoms persists, with the crumbling Harrenhal standing as a testament. The current king, his good brother Robert Baratheon, ascended to the throne by ending the Targaryen lineage. The fear now lies in the potential resurgence of the Targaryen dragons. Should a Targaryen dragon truly re-emerge, given the current circumstances, at least half of the lords of the 7 kingdoms would likely turn against one another, plunging the entirety of Westeros into a maelstrom of blood and fire. As one of the principal forces in the War of Usurpers, even if the North were to capitulate, the Stark family would likely face a grim fate. Thankfully, it was not the worst outcome. As dusk fell, Eddard Stark sent a significant portion of his men back to report their safety, while he, slightly inebriated, chose to rest for the night before returning. The remaining soldiers quickly fashioned a makeshift bed within the dwelling, situated opposite Godwyn's. Outside, the soldiers prepared dinner, while Godwyn and Eddard sat by the campfire. Godwyn, raising his cup with a smile, jested, "If you snore tonight, I shall throw you out." To which Eddard replied, "Then you would find no solace throughout the north. For everyone snores." Though a duke, Eddard Stark had fought on the battlefield, having known the hardships of sleeping beneath the sky and using the earth as his cover. Devoid of the affectations common among ordinary nobility, rubbing his temples, Eddard Stark, with a cheerful smile, had to concede that it had been a long time since he had relaxed in such a manner. Taking another sip of wine, he turned to Godwyn and inquired, "What is your homeland like? Is it the borderlands?" A hint of nostalgia flickered in Godwyn's eyes. There, countless towering trees stand, revered by the people as divine blessings. Beneath one of those trees lies the capital of the Golden Dynasty, Rodell City, my birthplace and the land for which I fought. Godwyn reminisced, vividly recounting tales of the borderlands, the starry sky over the 4 bell towers of the Cyfler River, the crumbling sky of the Sky City, the misty vistas of Linia, the desolate beauty of the ancient ruins atop cliffs, the canyons of the Atlas Plateau, and the Red Death Valley of Kaeld, as well as the Ionian marshes. Under Godwyn's evocative description, Eddard Stark seemed to glimpse that vibrant world, captivating even some of the guards outside, who became entranced, oblivious to the cooling food in their hands. It was indeed a place worth fighting for, and Eddard discerned the depth of Godwyn's yearning. Sipping his wine, Godwyn nodded, a touch of melancholy in his demeanor. "Yes, for this beautiful land, I poured forth all my strength, even traversing the realm of death, yet in the end, I still failed and cannot return." Eddard Stark extended his hand and patted Godwyn on the shoulder, offering a silent form of comfort. This man from the north preferred to express himself through actions rather than words. It was only then that Eddard truly cast aside his guard against Godwin. Such nostalgia could not be feigned, leading him to develop a fondness for the young man. Expressing one's feelings is far more liberating than keeping them bottled inside, Godwin mused, feeling as though a weight had been lifted from his heart. The last person who had encouraged him to speak so openly was General Latine, the Starbreaker. The bond between men could be forged so simply. A shared drink and a conversation were often enough to reveal compatibility. "How old are you?" Eddard Stark asked, gazing at Godwin. In truth, Godwin had lost track of his age, for demigods are ageless. Nevertheless, he settled on a number that matched his appearance. "I suppose I am 27. Though I cannot recall precisely." Eddard nodded, finding it in line with his expectations. "And you?" Godwin countered. 29, Eddard Stark replied, a hint of happiness in his smile. "My eldest son is already 13, and I am soon to welcome my 5th child." Godwin choked slightly. "Goodness, you have children already? I thought you were well into middle age. Come now, is that not quite normal?" Eddard retorted with a sidelong glance at Godwin. "After all, during those times of war, should I have fallen, my brother would become a night's watchman, leaving no heir to the title. Do you not have any children?" Gideon shook his head. Having fought throughout his life in the realm of the ring, never having considered such matters. Moreover, in the original tale, the Golden Monarch, Grake, who was suspected to be his offspring, possessed the abilities of a ruler, yet his power did not align with the stature of a demigod. To pursue an unattainable objective was a profound despair. To spare him from suffering, Gideon chose not to leave any descendants. Birth and death are two distinct concepts. "No, my focus has always been solely on battle." Gideon set down his goblet and shifted his position. Eddard Stark smiled, a rare display of warmth towards someone he had only recently met, and he began to comprehend the source of Gideon's formidable prowess. "I shall inquire with my wife to see if there are any suitable women of appropriate age for you." At the mention of this, Gideon felt somewhat uncomfortable. "Oh, please don't. I have no such plans." Observing Gideon's demeanor, Eddard refrained from pursuing the topic further and instead reminisced about battles he had previously participated in, seemingly nostalgic for his days on the battlefield. As he spoke animatedly, complete with gestures and sounds, it was as if he was reliving those moments. Sir Arthur Dane, the Dawn of the Sword, wielded his twin blades like an impenetrable wall. He was the strongest swordsman I had ever encountered until today, when I beheld you. Eddard expressed with a hint of wistfulness. "The years spent managing affairs have consumed far too much of my time and energy, causing my martial skills to deteriorate significantly. Had it been a few years ago, I would undoubtedly have challenged you." Gideon smiled at Eddard's self-awareness. It was not a mocking smile, but rather one of appreciation for a man possessing a warrior's heart. One must act according to their station. The world seldom offers perfect solutions. Typically, to gain something, one must relinquish something else. "If I weren't looking at you, I would assume those words came from a man in his 50s or 60s. Eddard chuckled lightly. That night, there were no dukes or princes. Only two kindred spirits quietly sharing their stories until Eddard, intoxicated, leaned back in his chair and fell asleep, prompting Gideon to carry him to bed. The following morning, Gideon rose early and found something to quell his hunger. At that moment, Eddard Stark, now reinstated as the Duke of Winterfell, had also donned his attire. Accepting a roasted fish that Gideon offered him. "Have you not packed your belongings? Did we not agree to stay in Winterfell?" Eddard inquired. Gideon shook his head. "No need. I shall leave these things here. I quite enjoy this place and would love to visit for a few days when time permits." Eddard said nothing further. To appear more conventional, Gideon chose not to wear just a single robe. Instead, he adorned himself in a brilliant blue ensemble, bordered with embroidered sunflowers symbolizing victory, overlaid with a grand cloak, which, while somewhat ostentatious, was the most understated attire he could muster. It seemed he would need to acquire a few more ordinary garments. As for the chest of gold, Gideon persuaded Eddard to accept it, for he had always preferred not to owe anyone. Extinguishing the hearth, Gedwin followed Eddard Stark out of the woods. After their conversation the previous night, Gedwin thought it might be pleasant to venture outside. After all, humans are inherently social beings. Despite being a demigod, he still possessed qualities intrinsic to humanity. Upon arriving in the village, the attention of all the common folk was drawn to the opulent figure of Gedwin, their curiosity piqued by the sight of a person returning from the forest with their lord. It was only when Eddard Stark declared his intent to provide food and assign personnel to aid in the reconstruction of their homes that their focus shifted back, and they began to sincerely praise the Lord's generosity. The guards offered a horse to Gedwin, and without delay, they surged forth like a torrent towards Winterfell. Winterfell is the ancestral castle and the epicenter of power for House Stark, regarded as the capital of the North. It is situated in the heart of the northern province of the Seven Kingdoms, with the King's Road connecting it to King's Landing and the Wall. Legend has it that this fortress was constructed over 8,000 years ago by the builder Bran the Builder, with the assistance of giants. It is a sprawling complex encompassing several acres, featuring 2 formidable walls and a wide moat, as well as a winter town at its gates. Winterfell itself is enveloped by an ancient sacred grove and built atop a hot spring. The warm waters are channeled through pipes within the walls to heat the rooms, rendering Winterfell more comfortable than other castles during the harsh winters of the north. At this moment, within Winterfell, under the direction of Lady Stark, servants bustled about like industrious bees, preparing dishes and decorations for the forthcoming feast, with a steady stream of supplies being transported from the storerooms. Observing these soon-to-be-consumed provisions, Master Luwin, the steward in charge of finances, felt a pang in his heart. The luxury represented by these items could sustain a village for an entire month if converted to gold dragons. "Master, I must confirm once more," he said. "Eddard has sent word to receive this guest with the standards befitting a duke, yet none of the lords have dispatched ravens. Who, then, is this individual?" The heavily pregnant Lady Stark was equally perplexed by her husband's unusual command, but she offered her unwavering support, knowing that Eddard would not make such an uncharacteristic decision without cause. Master Luwin closed the ledger and shook his head. According to the guard's accounts, Lord Eddard had encountered this person in the Wolfwood and discerned his remarkable status, although the precise identity remained unclear. He was said to be a prince hailing from the farthest east, engaging in amiable discourse with Lord Eddard. Amiable discourse? Lady Stark was taken aback. It was the first time she had heard such a description. Her husband, known for his taciturn demeanor both in public and private. How could he converse so warmly with someone he had only met for a day? It seemed this prince was quite the charismatic socialite, able to charm even someone as reserved as Eddard. Master Luwin smiled, recalling the visage of his lord, his heart lightening somewhat despite the financial strain. Indeed, it must be a most extraordinary prince. To bring joy to her husband, Lady Stark found the consumption of resources inconsequential. Reflecting upon the years, aside from the birth of their children, Eddard had not hosted such a grand feast for any other reason. "Hey, Arya, stop!" The once cheerful Lady Stark, upon witnessing Arya chasing after her brother Bran with a small wooden sword, was taken aback. Arya's face, smeared with an unknown dark substance, resembled that of a little calico cat, utterly lacking any semblance of decorum. Bran, frightened by her antics, burst into tears, while Arya, delighted by the chase, immediately fell silent like a quail upon her mother's reprimand. "I have told you countless times not to run about recklessly, and certainly not to brandish such things. This is unbecoming of a lady." Lady Stark seized the wooden sword and promptly handed it to Bran. Arya protested vehemently. "Mother, that is mine." "Enough." Lady Stark's expression hardened. "Your father will soon return with guests. Hurry and wash your face and change your clothes. We cannot allow the Stark family's daughters to appear uncouth." Defeated and puffed up like a pufferfish, Arya turned away in indignation. Bran called out her name, his short legs trying to keep up with his sister. Lady Stark sighed. Disciplining children was an arduous task, especially with a spirited child like Arya. "Maester, please summon Robb. It is time for him to engage in these matters," she instructed Maester Luwin, fully aware that being a good lord required more than mere martial prowess. Managing finances was an essential quality as well. Shortly thereafter, Theon observed Robb, who was struggling to comprehend Lady Stark's guidance, his expression one of confusion. Wintertown, located beyond the walls of Winterfell, was a bustling hub for the common folk during the autumn and winter months, alive with voices and vibrancy. Riding alongside Eddard Stark, Gedwyn engaged in conversation, while townsfolk frequently bowed to Eddard, their glances toward Gedwyn mostly filled with curiosity and perplexity. To return to Winterfell, "We could simply take the King's Road, yet Gedwyn insisted on visiting this town," Eddard noted. Upon entering, Gedwyn's first impression was one of dismay at the dreadful roads, muddy and devoid of proper footing, and although lively, the town's layout seemed rather ill-conceived. "What is that place? It appears to be thriving," he inquired, pointing to a busy establishment that resembled an inn. Eddard replied calmly, "The tavern. Business booms at this time of year." Gedwyn's smile faltered momentarily, but upon remembering the medieval context, he shifted the topic. "Why are the roads not repaired? There is hardly any place to step." "We lack the spare funds to hire laborers," Eddard replied brusquely. "But do you not send food to the common folk every winter? You could easily enlist their labor to improve the town rather than giving it away freely." Gedwyn continued with a solemn tone, emphasizing that as time passes, people often come to take for granted the provisions they receive, and should these suddenly cease, resentment inevitably follows. Upon hearing this, Eddard Stark furrowed his brow in contemplation, recognizing that this notion was at odds with the chivalric principles he upheld. As a lord, he bore the responsibility of protecting his people. This does not conflict with your duties, Gadwin countered. It merely transforms the manner of aid from direct provision of sustenance to a system where labor is exchanged for support. Uncertain about the management style of other lords, Gadwin saw this as a dual benefit. It alleviated the plight of the afflicted while simultaneously enhancing infrastructure. A better environment would ensure that the area would not remain desolate in the summer months, potentially even extending its positive effects to neighboring villages. This, he posited, could create a virtuous cycle wherein the overall economic climate improves, thereby uplifting individual circumstances. Gadwin's words struck Eddard Stark profoundly. After years of lordship, he had accrued insights that allowed him to discern the merits and flaws of such policies. Yet, he remained silent, needing someone to persuade him further. Is this your experience? Eddard inquired pensively. Gadwin chuckled. Indeed, there is much more for you to learn. Perhaps I should recruit you. It would ease my burdens considerably. Eddard took no offense. Within a single day, he had recognized that Gadwin surpassed him in both martial prowess and governance, particularly in regard to the flourishing cities Gadwin described, where policies had proven their efficacy. This was one of the reasons Eddard held Gadwin in high esteem. With a hearty laugh, Gadwin raised an eyebrow. I am quite costly, but I assure you, worth every penny. Beyond battles, while Gaffrey contemplated unifying the borders and Malika sought to refine the golden laws, it was Gadwin who enacted policies to stabilize the situation, addressing matters of both economy and diplomacy. The demigods might not require such measures, but the soldiers engaged in warfare did. It can be asserted that without Gadwin, the Golden Dynasty would remain a barbaric force focused solely on conflict and plunder, lacking the ability to soothe the populace or foster culture. This is why Gadwin earned the moniker Golden, for even Gaffrey's shadowy beast, the Chancellor Sorotheus, embodying wisdom and civilization, could only assist him. Not lingering long in the town, Gadwin followed Eddard Stark into a castle that had withstood the test of millennia. At the inner gate, Lady Stark awaited alongside several children and all their retainers, adhering to the customs of nobility. A guest of significance to Eddard Stark was one that must also be esteemed by them. From a distance, Lady Stark spotted the opulent figure walking alongside her husband, a splendor she had not encountered among any noble in the Seven Kingdoms, not merely due to the exquisite garments or lustrous golden hair, but because of the innate composure that radiated from him. Mother, who is that? Arya, held by Lady Stark, could no longer contain her curiosity. Robb and the others were equally intrigued, yet remained silent. Quiet, Lady Stark commanded, offering no answer. As he approached the gathering, Eddard Stark introduced his family to Gerdwyn, saying, "These are my loved ones." Gerdwyn glanced at Eddard and, without waiting for further introductions, stepped towards Lady Stark, bowing slightly. Surely, she must be Lady Stark. There is an old saying in my homeland. Behind every successful man stands a supportive and virtuous woman. Indeed, it seems to hold true. Lady Stark returned the courtesy, her face alight with an unmistakable smile upon hearing such a description. You flatter me. This is Gerdwyn Goldo, but simply Gerdwyn will suffice. Eddard and I share a remarkable camaraderie, he added, giving Eddard a friendly pat on the arm. Wouldn't you agree? Eddard remained silent, managing a strained smile, as doubts crept in about whether inviting Gerdwyn to Winterfell was a prudent choice. This must be Robb, Gerdwyn remarked, directing his gaze towards the young man standing beside Lady Stark, who presented himself with an air of maturity. A fine, sturdy lad. Do you know how to wield a sword? I've learned a bit from the instructor, Robb Stark replied, his nerves evident, as it was his first encounter with a stranger who conversed so easily with his father. Gerdwyn recalled the tragic events of the Red Wedding, where Robb Stark met a gruesome fate, taking Lady Stark and many of his loyal bannermen down with him. A man of great valor but lacking in cunning, perhaps a result of Eddard Stark's upbringing. Quite promising. I expect you will grow to be a valiant warrior of House Stark, Gerdwyn mused, his words deliberately vague. Mindful of his status as a newcomer, Eddard furrowed his brow, while Lady Stark beamed with pride at the praise bestowed upon her child.